Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Art of Gracious Living. Today, we're mad for Madras. I'm filming this the very end of June 2026, and this is the perfect time to talk about my favorite summer shirt, Madras cloth. Now, I'm mad for Madras, but I'm also mad about Madras because original vegetable dye, sesame or coconut oil, fixed fabric made in India with the original rice water sizing, all of which give bleeding Madras its unique characteristics and its ability to and necessity to bleed over all your other things in the laundry and on itself are just no longer available. They are unobtainable. It is an extinct fabric and an extinct manufacturing process, even in India. There are good reasons for that, but none of which benefit the consumer who's looking for that original Madras cloth. Probably very few, if any, of my listeners have ever experienced the original bleeding Madras or guaranteed to bleed Madras. That's what the tags used to say. And it was because the stuff bled out. That none of the colors were color fast. They bled out all over each other, all over everything else in your wash. They had to be hand washed in cold water. A little warm water if you wanted to accentuate the bleed, which was really very desirable. The first Madras shirt I ever saw was actually a windbreaker that I found in the Gloucester found at my high school. And I wore it for several years until it eventually wore out. It was probably at least 10 years old when I found it in 1976. And it was well worn and had bled considerably, but in a way that was absolutely magical. There was no white whatsoever on the cloth. All the white squares in the plaid were pink because the red madder dye had bled over all those white squares to make them look kind of a pale bluish pink, which looked great. All the colors had blended together, and there was nothing. I'd never seen anything like it. And frankly, I have very rarely seen anything like it since. It was extremely thin. Madras cloth was not, by its own very nature, intended to be long wearing. It is woven out of staple cotton, which is what they're able to grow in southern India, as opposed to the long staple cotton, which is what you see in Sea Isle cotton, Egyptian cotton, which is very long wearing and a bit stiffer. The short staple cotton allows for a very, very loose drape because the yarn segments have lots of spaces in between one another as opposed to the long staple cotton. So they make supremely soft and easy drapable fabric. They were also originally hand spun yarn. This short staple cotton cannot be combed, it has to be carded, which is a different, much more labor intensive process. All the dyes that were originally used were vegetable dyes, not modern aniline dyes, which are a chemical byproduct of petroleum, which certainly have revolutionized the manufacture of clothing, allowing for bright, color fast tones and colors in all the clothes you wear. But there's nothing like that original vegetable dyes, madder, saffron, other colorful botanicals that are used to dye fabric and that were used to dye fabric for thousands of years before the invention of aniline dyes. So, not only that, but they were hand woven in small workshops. In fact, the city of Madras, by the turn of the 19th century, was almost completely taken over by hand weaving. Hand weaving is very, very difficult work, very low pay. The fact that hand weaving has gone away from the Indian textile economy is not necessarily a bad thing for the workers, but machine woven Madras cloth loses that slubby, textured feel. they're also far more tightly woven. And the fact that the yarn is no longer hand twisted means that the yarns that are finally used in the industrial weaving machines finer, more consistent, and can be woven tighter. So what you get today is a completely different product from what you would have seen in the early to mid 60s and was frankly almost entirely gone by the end of the 60s and the early 70s when machine woven synthetic dyes had completely revolutionized and modernized the Indian textile industry. I remember looking for a bleeding Madras shirt in 76 after I had seen this original one. I wanted to get a shirt. I believe I found a Gant. They were scarce, first of all, and try as I would, it would not bleed. Now, it was a lovely shirt, and in fact, it was very similar to these blue and yellow and red shirts that I'm showing you right now. And I loved the shirt, and I wore it, but it was not the original stuff. It was not the genuine bleeding Madras, which really was a shame. So the era of preppy Madras shirts with the original bleeding Madras was really only lasted about 10 years, from approximately 1955 to 1965. That was the heyday of Madras. And because Madras shirts are so delicate, they wear out so quickly, they're very, very difficult to find. I've searched and searched on eBay, Depop, and all the other various resale forums, and they are almost unobtainable. You might find one, you might find none, and that's out of tens of thousands of Madras listings in eBay. So very, very rare, and you're just not going to find them. I'll explain to you in a little bit about how to identify the original bleeding Madras, but first I want to show you some shirts that I've got. Now, the shirts that are made today, again, as I've said, are not at all the original vegetable dyed, sesame oil fixed dye fabrics. Some manufacturers come closer than others. O'Connell's is one maker and seller of shirts that makes a very good semi authentic Madras cloth, in that I believe it may use vegetable dyes, but it uses synthetic modern dye fixatives. That's my opinion. They obviously don't get into that much of a granular detail in their advertising and on their website, but they do say wash separately cold. That is the sign that you are probably as close as you can get to original bleeding Madras. Now, it will never say bleeding Madras anymore. And if it does, it's a marketing tagline. Ralph Lauren made a lot of Madras shirts in the 2000s, early 2000s, and even through today. And they put bleeding Madras on their labels, but there was nothing bleeding about it. It was completely modern technology, and they did not run. They were completely color fast. But if you find original bleeding Madras or guaranteed to bleed Indian Madras on a vintage shirt, that is the original real deal stuff. And you can get close, or at least as close as possible, if the label says hand wash separately, cold water. And here's a hand wash separately, cold water, Brooks Brothers. This is probably from the early 2000s, and it's a really lovely shirt. I love the yellow, red, and blue. This is, to me, a really classic men's color for Madras. And this is one of my favorite shirts, short sleeve, although many Madras shirts come long sleeve. Very nice matching, as you can see. Um, Pocket matching, lovely job. A great, great garment. This is a somewhat later tag. Uh, Authentic Indian Madras. Imported fabric. As you can see, it doesn't It doesn't claim to be bleeding. But if you look at the tag, 100% cotton, made in India, machine washed cold with light colors. Only non chlorine bleach, tumble dry low, warm iron if needed. So this is a little bit older, maybe 15 to 20-year-old Brooks Brothers. I have not examined their Madras shirts since they came out of bankruptcy. I hope they're doing a good job. But O'Connell's also sells a similar shirt, very expensive. So I suspect that they are doing some really special stuff with the fabrics. And it is as close as you can get to the original bleeding Madras, but they're not bleeding Madras. What they are is an authentic Madras cloth, as authentic as you can get today. So the Brooks Brothers, great shirt, box pleat in the back. Wonderful, wonderful Madras shirt. The next one I want to show you is another equally lovely shirt, very similar. Um, Now, the Brooks Brothers, the O'Connells, and this Ben Silver, they're all high quality, but they are obviously woven in industrial high speed looms. These are not hand woven. That type of fabric manufacture is probably thankfully gone. Um, but it is still made in India, Indian cotton, very, very light, short staple, drapes beautifully. This is a long sleeve shirt, as you can see, with the typical Ben Silver quality. Lovely, lovely shirt. Of course, all Ben Silver stuff is beautiful. Look at the little gusset on the sides here. Beautiful, beautiful craftsmanship. Um, Unfused lining on the collar, although I think there is a lining in there. It is unfused. Little side pleats, not a center box pleat. Great shirt. Ben Silver, Charleston, fine shirting, made in India. Now, this probably uses a modern dye that is in some process or another artificially faded to give that faded Madras look. Again, this is my opinion. And the reason I say that is because we have on the label 100% cotton, machine washable. Well, that's strike one. Warm, that's strike two. It does not say with light colors, that's strike three. So this is a beautiful shirt, a great look, a shirt I'm proud to own and proud to wear, but it is a step away from the cold water only Brooks Brothers and O'Connell shirts. And I suspect, as I said, it's that they all use modern fixatives, so they're all color fast. You're never going to see bleeding on any of these, the Brooks Brothers, the O'Connells, or this Ben Silver. But at least the O'Connells and the Brooks Brothers use, in my opinion, vegetable dyes. This, I believe, is completely modern manufacturing process shirt. And again, you can wash this with anything. You know, I can wash this with whites. It's not going to bleed. Again, a lovely shirt, one of my favorites. Now, next is something really special. This is sort of a patchwork Madras shirt, but it's slightly different from what I'm going to show you in a minute. These are big, big panels of patches. And this is one of my favorite new manufacturers that I've just recently discovered, and it's F.A. MacCluer. And I'm going to be doing a video on MacCluer shirts. I'm going to give you a little preview. They are a screaming bargain on eBay. And MacCluer made Brooks Brothers shirts for many, many years. That first Brooks Brothers Madras shirt was probably made by MacCluer. MacCluer still is in business, and O'Connell uses MacCluer as well for some of their shirts. That's how I first discovered the name. And they've been around since 1856. This, again, is a 100% cotton, authentic Indian Madras, tailored in the United States, but completely color fast, completely synthetic dyes. And you can tell again by machine wash warm, tumble dry. Uh, you can wash this with anything. You can wash this with whites. You can wash this with colors. It will not bleed. But I will tell you, this has got to be the finest cloth I've ever, certainly the finest Madras cloth I've ever seen. This has got to be at least 120 threads per inch. There's no doubt in my mind. It's just incredibly soft, incredibly drapey, looks super cool. You know, it doesn't take the patchwork too far. The whole back is one color. You can see through this. I mean, this is just as thin as thinner than paper, tissue paper thin. So this is just a super cool shirt that doesn't scream loudly and short sleeve. This is probably my favorite Madras shirt. I absolutely love this shirt. And MacCluer, like I said, is making great stuff. They may very well be behind those good O'Connell shirts. But it is a completely modern manufacturer. In fact, you could never hand weave cotton threads as tight as these and as fine as these. So great, great Madras shirt. I love it. I wear it all the time. Now, I'm going to show you this shirt that I'm wearing right now. This is also a MacCluer's, and this is your hardcore patchwork Madras. This is not cold wash only separately, hand wash. This is again, a completely modern manufacturer, aniline dye, modern fixatives. Button down shirt. It did come with a lot of sizing in the fabric. I got this on eBay. It was supposedly used, but it wasn't. It had never been worn. It still had the original sizing. And after washing and drying it, it softened up beautifully and beautifully. And the best of these patchwork shirts are more or less matched in terms of their colors. They don't have wildly disparate colorways in the individual patches. As you can see, these all sort of kind of have a very, very similar color palette. And therefore, even though it's a loud shirt, it's not overly loud. And I wear this everywhere. I wore it to church just this week. Um, and again, F.A. MacCluer, what a great company. What wonderful stuff. This is made in India. Also, I think that you're going to find all of these made in India because India is a pretty economical place to have shirts made, even though they are using completely modern methods now. So this is just a great, great shirt that I love. And finally, I'm going to show you an Orvis. Now, Orvis did some beautiful, beautiful Madras stuff. Beautiful, beautiful Madras patchwork shirts. So I highly recommend you take a look for good vintage Orvis or used Orvis, lightly used Orvis. 100% cotton, made in India. And while this is Madras cloth, it is almost an Oxford weave, but it's very, very, very thin. Beautifully, beautifully light. And certainly real Madras. Again, this is somewhat more authentic in that it's machine wash cold with light colors. So this, like the Brooks Brothers, is ironically, even though it's not a plaid, it's closer to the original Madras fabric. And again, these are such faded little colors that I think that it probably used vegetable dyes, but with a modern fixative. And I like this because it's patchwork, but very understated, very low key. Orvis did a bunch of stuff, obviously, a few seasons ago. Orvis has largely gotten away from its retail model. They closed all their stores and they're focusing just on hunting and fishing wear. But you can still find lots of clothes, and they're of the highest, highest quality. And this one ranks right up there with O'Connell's and Brooks Brothers in terms of the authenticity of the dyes that are used. Made in India, 100% cotton, button down collar, and get this box pleat locker loop. By the way, the shirt I'm wearing right here also has a locker loop. Definitely a MacCluer's trademark. I love locker loops. You rarely see them anymore. And I wouldn't be surprised if MacCluer made this shirt. I wouldn't be surprised if MacCluer made the Brooks Brothers shirt that I just showed you. And I wouldn't be surprised if MacCluer made the O'Connell shirt. In fact, I think I have a pretty high confidence that they did. So MacCluer may well be the modern day king of Madras. Great shirts. So again, I highly recommend that you look for Madras. I wear it all the time. It's really not too loud at all, in my opinion. Pairs great with khaki pants. Pairs great with jeans. You just can't beat Madras, and the comfort level surpasses linen, in my opinion. So go out and find yourself from Madras. Although I'm a little bit mad about Madras because you can't get that original bleeding fabric. If anybody knows how to find that, please leave a comment. So tell me about your own Madras shirts. Leave comments. If you like this content, please subscribe and like. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you soon.